So yes, hi, very warm morning to everyone. My name is Baljinder Singh. I'm Community Manager India, handle all India operations. So if I'll take you a small tour from what is bitgrit. So bitgrit is an AI competition and a recruiting platform with having a home to data scientist of more than 30,000. We completed last month that we cross our community of 30,000 data scientists. People are more coming, and we are today. I'm very feeling very proud to have Mr. Nishant Arora as our guest speaker for this event, who is currently holds the position as a senior manager for Freshworks. He was an early adopter of AI technology and has honed his skills by working at some of the largest tech companies in the world today. He has helped hundreds of clients across the globe in developing and implementing successful AI strategies. He has also been rated as one of the top SMEs for big data and augmented analytics of social media. So, all over to Mr. Nishant.
So, as I said, right, like the answer to the question is if it is written in Python, it's machine learning. And if it is written in PowerPoint, it's artificial intelligence. Today is an PowerPoint day, so we are calling this session artificial intelligence or improving employee experience with artificial intelligence. If I were to take you to some of the coding classes behind this, we would call the same technologies machine learning or deep learning, as you may say. Of course, this is a joke, right? But this is also to highlight the fact that AI is a huge buzzword right now. A lot of people have high expectations from AI. So when people were talking about, right, like some of the answers we got was like, can AI, answer answers in different genre? But if you think about it, like you still need to train the model, right? And once the moment you build a model, it's either a machine learning model, like you will be using one of the core capabilities. But as I said, right, like the hype of AI is real. So this joke was just to highlight the hype and also have some fun while we get started. So now let's get into the meat of the topic, right? So why do we care about employee experience, right? Like we know, we have heard a lot about customer experience, right? Like why customer is the king and why they're important. But we believe, right, like if you don't have happy employees, you're not going to be able to get happy customers. And together, employee and customer delight are the twin pillars of success of for any organization for the matter, right? Like if your employees are not happy, you cannot expect them to create exceptional experiences for your clients. And if you don't enable your employees well, they will also struggle to create those experiences, right? Like they may have the right intentions in place. All right. So with that, I want to tell you that like every employee once like, and some of you, I understand, like we have a mixed crowd today. Some people have a, like are working in corporate. Some people are still studying and are looking forward to their first jobs. What we know is like you interact with different departments on disparate channels, right? Like sometimes like you want to do your job, you want access to, like say for example, you're a data scientist, you want access to certain data, and you want to make sure you get access to that data. And like a lot of research indicates that data wrangling is roughly 80% of a data scientist's time. And a lot of that time, like when I worked or when I started working as a data scientist 10 years ago, uh, it was also in getting approvals to get access, right? Like I know this data source exists here, but just to get approvals to it, you have to build a business case, send emails, and then they have questions. And by the time you get access to that data source, it's 5 days already. So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Like that's one problem. But if you think about it, every day when you're working, you need different things every time. And these things can be as silly as, oh, I need budget to buy something, or I have, like my laptop has stopped working, or my Zoom has stopped working, which is on the IT side. Sometimes, like all of us, like we also, yeah. Did anybody have a question? All right. So if you don't mind, like while I'm presenting, let's like go on mute. And if you have any questions, you can ping it on chat, and then I think we will open it up. Like I will keep opening it up for questions during the middle of the presentation as well, and towards the end as well. All right. So I was saying, right, like you interact with different departments. Like sometimes you want a lot of stuff from HR as well, right? Like you want letters, you have questions on your pay slips and whatnot. And many a times related to your jobs, right? Like you want access to GitHub repositories because that's what allows you to do your jobs better. And you use multiple channels to reach out to people. Like sometimes you want to reach out to that person like when COVID is over or when COVID was not there, you sometimes used to walk to them, and sometimes you want to ping them on Slack or on Teams, you want to send them an email. So like there are disparate channels and disparate people you need information for. So that's like a huge, right? Like on one hand there are like so many different people, and then there are so many different channels. So that's huge. And if you raise any request, what we
Hello, Bob.
see, yeah, hello, yeah. So what if when
Uh,
you
Nishant, I'm sorry to disturb you. Please, it's a request to everyone. Please keep your mics on mute. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So when you raise any request internally, it takes 26.7 hours for resolution. Now that's looks like a huge number, but anybody who has worked and just think about it, it's on an average pretty accurate for all the organizations. In fact, I would argue that some or many organizations, if they've not done their digital transformation right, this number is significantly higher. So if you're using AI and automation, this number can be lower, but for most organizations, we know uh, it is about the right number. And think about it, right? Like the number of requests that we have, and just multiply the man hours wasted, right? Like once you start Raven, like if you're going to wait for 26.7 hours for resolution, it just a lot of time. And out of the 26.7 hours, what we saw was 18.8 hours is like assigning the support ticket. Like say for instance, you requested for access to data. By the time the person, like who wants to write it to the right contact, it takes 18.8 hours for them to like read the email and say, right, like, okay, you requested me person X, but person X is right, like responsible for it, but the action needs to be taken by person Y. So they will read that email in 18.8 hours, and then they will route it to person Y, who will then take the action. So what employees want is they want self-service on any channel, right? Like a lot of these things can be automated, like getting access to any data repository or any questions that you may have from HR or IT department. And the other challenge is like with COVID, like one big thing that is emerging is everybody is figuring out what their preferred working hours are, right? Like 9 to 5 is not working out for most people because like some people are married, they have kids, so they have to take care of the kids. Some people prefer working early morning, some people prefer working late in the day. So the service providers inside the organization uh, are struggling to cope up with this, but employees want access at any time, and many a times our clients are global, right? So we see, right, like on this group, like some people are in China and some people are in India, but sometimes our clients are in US. So imagine you are working on a project uh, in the evening, China time or India time, and sorry, I need to just disconnect this phone call. Yeah, so and you need something done, but the person you need this information for is already logged off for the day. So you want, and that is going to delay, like your output. So you want assistance at all time. And when you are making simple requests, employees want instant resolution, right? Like if you want something as simple as getting access to GitHub repository, it's not very hard to build a machine learning system to understand that, okay, you want to keep data confidential, but if you are in the right team, like where you should have access to it, then we can pretty much, right, like set up an automation in place to do it. And which is not a how do I put it, an unrealistic expectation. And the reality is, like, a lot of people say that, right? Like, in our personal life, we are spoiled by our favorite digital companies. Like, the fact that you order food on Swiggy or a Zomato or a Uber Eats or a DoorDash, and you are able to track, right, like where the person is, when they're gonna come. Or when you order stuff from Amazon, right, like the kind of support you get from your favorite digital companies is phenomenal, and you want the same support at work. And that is a huge trend that we are seeing right now. And we did a survey with HBR, and we found that employee experience, the companies who do it right, that improves not just the morale, but it also improves productivity. And 77% of the employees will consider a new employer if their current job does not provide access to tools, technologies, and information. Now think about it. It's not like if you're struggling to do basic stuff and another company has all the process in place, you will be much more not be productive there. But as an employee, you would want to go work there. A no brainer there, right? And employees have high expectations today, right, like than 10 years ago. And employee happiness is also impacted by how well workplace technology platforms perform. Like, and again, a no brainer, right? Like, if you're struggling to get basic stuff done, you will not be very happy, right? Like you're waiting for getting, like the same example that we have used earlier, right? Like, to get access to a simple database, if you have to wait for 5 days, that can be frustrating at times. And the third dimension is, like, when you are a service provider, like let's assume you are somebody who people reach out to for getting, uh, let's take the same example, getting access to the data. You have a day job, but you, because you manage a database, employees come to you and say that they want access to it. As a service provider, you most likely hate the fact that you get so many requests for that data, and you have to check that same things for every employee. Like, do is the request valid, are they in the right departments? And you have a set of rules which are very, very repeatable. And as a, like a service provider, you don't really want to do it, right? Like, you want this to be automated. Like, we have so much advancements in AI and machine learning that you want this automated, and it's not like an unfair request. And we are seeing roughly 66% of the employees make that request of their or have that expectation. Now, we did a survey with IDG report, right? Like, we went to the CIOs and we asked them, right, like what are the big trends that they're seeing. Now, this survey was done with over 850 IT leaders, and like 34% of the organizations were large, 42% were mid-sized, 23% were small, and across 14 countries, across 4 regions. So some of the findings were that, like, 9 out of the 10 respondents said that the service inquiry volume is going to increase by 20% over next 12 months. And they're already seeing a lot of increase in requests. And more than 50% of the daily requests that people get fall into this labor intensive and inefficient variety, which is essentially, right, like where there's limited automation today. And AI is at forefront of the ITSM modernization initiative. So when I'm again, right, I'll go back to my opening joke that if it was Python, I would, and if we were doing this session as a hands-on lab, I would be showing you code. Then I would be showing you all the machine learning models that we have written to automate things. But because this is a presentation, so I will just talk about, like some of the findings over here. So 27% of the survey respondents have AI-enabled service management and operations management solutions. 34% have made initial deployments in select use cases, and 32% are exploring AI-based solutions and or gathering information about them. Now, if you're working in a corporate job or are a student, uh, the reason to bring this up is you should know, right? Like, this is an area that is going to see a huge investment. So a right inflection point for you to think about as you start looking at it. Now, the top focus area with AI for service management, which improves employee experience, is 48% are doing chatbots and 39% on help desk resolution. So chatbots are becoming mainstream for employee experience, right? Like, a lot of the challenges that we have said or spoke about, they can be solved with AI and automation, and chatbots can front end it. Like, think about chatbots as a buddy, right? Like, that you have, you can ask them anything or give them any request, and they will solve that answer for you. Like, you want access to a data source. Now, instead of reaching out to a human, if you had a chatbot, you can ask that chatbot, and that chatbot should use a machine learning model at the back end to determine which service request it tags to, and that service request you can automate it, right? Like, perform these steps, and you can even automate, right, like approval routing. So in many cases you can define, if you work in, say for instance, these teams, and this is the nature of your work, your access is provisioned, and which is, again, right, like, you can train the machine learning model to do that. And if you don't work in these areas and you're requesting for it, maybe, like, you should be routed to a human for approval, so that they can check if your request is valid or not. Pretty like a low hanging fruit in the way how chatbots can transform the experience. So now, right, like, going back to our original example, the person who needed access to a data source, if they have a chatbot which is powered by AI and automation, they can get that data source access almost instantaneously, instead of having to even, right, like, sometimes it's even a struggle to figure out who in the organization has the access to that database. Now, let's talk about what are the benefits that people in the survey said that, like, they are gaining, versus what are the areas they are yet to experience. So a lot of people felt that automation improves with these AI investments. End user productivity improves for 39%. They're able to reduce staff workload. As I said, right, like, even when you are working in a service desk, you don't want repeatable things to come to you. You want to focus on high value stuff. And another huge thing is reduced downtime and outages. So if you have a lot of automations in place, and with the emerging trend of what we called AI ops, uh, you can reduce outages or mean time to repair significantly. And finally, right, like, it leads to increased perception of IT among stakeholders. Now, collaboration and monitoring SLA compliance and reducing costs, that is where people are yet to experience benefits with AI. Now, on the next slide, let's, like, take a deep dive into employee service management powered by AI and automation. Now, I'm using another new term here, right? Enterprise service management. And I started with employee experience, and some of you may be wondering why the change. And the primary difference between enterprise service management and employee experience is ESM enables an exception employee experience. So think of it as your goal is employee experience, but how you get there is by transforming enterprise service management. And I will share more details with what that means. Now, you want a consistent and unified employee experience across all departments, and you want to enable self-service across all of our employees, and you want to streamline workflow and SLA management for agents and service provider, and you want, like, a easy to use way for people to raise requests and get resolution. Now, the delightful employee experience and some of the key intersection points are team collaboration. How do you request for help? How do you request for information? How do you request for services? How do you optimize cost and efficiency? How do you request for changes for existing services? How do you provide self-service and access to information, right? So that's the essence of it. And in the subsequent section, we will see how AI and automation technologies are transforming this. Now, some of the modern service enterprises, are the challenges that they are finding is, like, they have, like, when you're searching for information, and which is a classic ML problem, right? Like, you can create a knowledge graph, and you can, like, start providing answers instantaneously, pretty much at the back end, like how Google is as the world's best search engine, right? So searching for information is hard inside the organization, and it's fragmented across teams, and there are different solutions that are in place. Uh, 82% of the employees agreed on reduced productivity and service delivery experience due to multiple established processes. And 39% of employees report limited collaboration due to outdated solutioning needs. So these are like big rocks that AI and automation can help move for modern enterprises today. Now now there is also, right, like these high performing organizations, when you look around, right, like you see this huge difference, right? Like there are organizations which are high performing, and there are organizations which are not really high performing, and it goes back to our opening slide, right? Like employee delight and customer delight are twin pillars of success, and in many cases they're linked. So in high performing organization, we see that, like they're striving to deliver employee delight and they're striving to deliver customer delight. And they feel that like IT is the enabler, right? Like most of the ESM initiatives center around IT. So in different departments in IT, they have like 89% of the respondents believe they have a better relationship, and 70% of the ESM initiatives are successful, and 37 even manage to reduce costs. Like think of it this way: if you can automate a lot of the work, you can actually reduce considerable amount of costs, and that is not even counting the improved productivity and employee delight. So enterprise service management using AI and automation removes a lot of manual processes. Employees can get solutions more quickly. You get a super fast return on investment if you are working in the IT department. And ESM makes it easy for work to pass between individual and groups, and it helps better deliver against employee expectations. Now, what we are also seeing is like organizations are starting to deploy these solutions, right? Like uh, at the forefront is IT service management, and then we are now gradually extending it to other departments. On the next slide, I want to talk about key capabilities that a modern enterprise service management solution delivers, right? Like you need extensibility. Think of it this way: the needs of employees in many cases would rest on applications outside the organization, right? Like you want to like be able to automate and use AI to improve service requests from that you're getting from, say, your payroll system, or from your marketing system, or from your uh, finance systems, or like once we go back to work, facilities will have a huge amount of requests, right? Like you would want to like ping a chatbot and say, I want to go to office tomorrow, and you would expect the bot to provision a seat for you, and make sure that the seat is sanitized. Again, something that can be automated, but like at the back end, that would mean that your chatbot has to work with multiple vendors or applications at the back end. The second thing is customizable, right? Like different departments have different services they provide. So how do you customize it while maintaining a unified experience platform? Uh, Quick returns are a huge deal. The next thing is efficient, right? Like you want to make sure that your enterprise service management is efficient and you're able to delight it, right? Like the fact that you can do things in natural language, that should help you improve satisfaction. And finally, compliance, right? Like the more we start working with Europe or US, there are certain laws that you need to take care of, right? Like especially around personal data. So you don't want a chatbot that is exposing personal data to like and not complying to, say, GDPR guidelines. So now let's take a deep dive into HR, right? Like we have spoken a lot about employee experience and some of the enabling technologies. So we'll need to pick up a single department and see, right, like how AI and automation can transform service management from an HR standpoint. And we can pretty much, right, like today I'm only going to cover HR, but we can pretty much use the same framework to transform service management for any department internally. So think of it this way, right? Like we're going to talk about HR with or without AI and automation. So without AI and automation, exceptional service uh, or exceptional experiences are a challenge, right? So you have processes that are not automated. You have chaotic new employee onboarding, right? Like because you have systems that don't talk to each other and you have not set up workflows that can automate it. Collaboration is hard. There's no real way to track, right, like what needs to happen where. And for every small needs, you HR department keeps going back to the IT department. But with AI and automation, you can transform HR service management like how you can transform any department for that matter. So you can create a service desk, you can create a knowledge base. Creating a knowledge base means that you can then, like, if you have a knowledge base, you can then use search. Virtual agent and service self-service, I think I have spoken a lot about it already. They are central to AI and automation initiatives and project management, and finally automation at the back end on how do you automate certain service requests, and we will go deep dive into each one of them. Now think about it this way, right? Over here I have a lot of frequently asked questions. Now I want you to take a quick look at them and think, can we use AI and ML to automate it, right? Like, these are low hanging fruits. So somebody wants to, like, say for example, let's talk about employee verification letter request. Now it's a very simple thing, right? Like, you have a database where you have the, like, whatever you want to verify against. Let's assume you want a letter that you want to submit that has your salary details. So you want to, you say, like, you're applying for a loan and bank is asking, can you give me a letter from your company that you are at a particular amount of salary. And if you don't have AI automation, what you would do is you will send an email to HR will see it the next day. They will log into the system of your payroll, create that letter manually, and print it, and then send it to you. uh, Again, right, like, this process can, depending on like how uh, busy your HR is, can take a while, or can take a long time as well, right? Like, if they're on leave, then you're pretty much waiting for them to come back from leave. And for the HR who's sending you this letter, when you send this request, they are like, oh shit, one more request of printing the letter. It's not really a high value stuff for them, right? Like, it's not high value work to find out what is in the database and send it. Now, another real life instance I can give you is when you want verification, your bank may need certain details, and you will need to give clear instructions to HR. So it is possible that you send a request, can you give me a verification letter, and she gives you a verification letter, but it does not include the exact details that you need. So there is a back and forth as well. Now think of it this way: what if you create a chat bot that can take these requests at the front end in natural language? So you can use natural language and say, hey, I'm applying for a loan and I need a salary verification letter, which is very pretty much, right, like how you would talk to HR. So you can train the bot to understand the intent that you have, that you want an employee verification letter from HR. Now at the back end, what you can automate is set up a work automation workflow which says, okay, goes to your HRMS system and says, okay, this is your name, this is your detail, goes to the payroll system, retrieves the payroll, have a already existing format of verification letter in place that exists, pick it up, copy paste it, use a digital signature solution to get it, like, sign it, and you can pretty much get your employee verification letter in 3 to 4 minutes. And I'm sure, right, like, I like many of us have struggled with this, but the companies that have solved this problem, and you can get your letter in 3 minutes flat from requesting it, or sometimes even in, like, I have timed it and I have received letters in, say, 45 seconds as well. Like, the whole automation can be done pretty quickly. So just imagine the peace you get, like, because you're able to get support so quickly, and compare it to, like, waiting for 5 days to get that letter, and like, stressing about, like, has the HR seen my email, has she actioned on it, trying to correct the errors. And yeah, so it's like, it's a classic problem that we can solve, pretty much like everything else that you see over here. So let's take another example. You have a question on R&R policy, right? Like, you want an award and you want to know why, like, what's the criteria of the award, and how do you get it, how do you apply for it. Every employee has the same question. So think of it this way: if you are a department with 200 employees and you have one single HR person, all 200 employees, like, out of 200, at least 120 will reach out to the HR with the same question. So HR is inundated, like the time that like you want HR to focus on, right, like their core job, which is right, like creating delightful experience and policies for you, they are inundated with requests, right? Like, can you tell me how do I get an award? Now it's a very transactional, low value thing, right? Like they're going to give the same answer to everyone. But why can't you train a bot to give that answer and free up the HR to focus on things that value a lot? So think about it, right? Like you have, at some point, if you're working, you have reached out to HR for these requests, and just think about it, right? Like how easy it is for HR and automation to solve this. Now let's take a deep dive, right? Like first is building a knowledge base. Knowledge base is nothing but you create a repository of all the policies. The reason you want to do it is then you want a machine learning model to go and read through everything and understand it and create a knowledge graph. Like knowledge base serves as a critical capability for anything which can be answerable in text. So any policy question you can pretty much, like if you create a knowledge base, you can, by enabling natural knowledge graph and search models on it, you can start giving answers to employees immediately. Then comes self-service, right? Like using a bot to answer the queries. Now bot at the back end can link to the knowledge base, and then I will talk about automation at a later stage, so they can deflect their questions straight away. Then we can talk about no code low code automations. Now this is critical, right? Like if you think about it, a lot of the processes that we have today, they can right, like you can think about automating at least parts of it. So like you get a lot of requests around, say for example, your company came up with a policy that like if you face COVID, you can request for a $50,000 loan or some loan amount, right, depending on what currency you're looking at. Now launching or having that intent, now if you want to do it manually, then every employee again, right, like goes through the same struggles. So can you automate it, which is right, like you set up a system where you can create a service request and then you can set up rules, right? Like okay, uh, this is what needs to happen, these are the steps that need to happen, and you can set up simple rules to automate stuff. And you can pretty much, like taking or continuing the financial assistance policy example, right? Like what you want is the employee to upload, right, like their COVID test report. So you can set up, like if the moment somebody goes and requests for it, you can create a service item. They click on that and they are like, okay, upload your test report. Then you can set up an automation or some ML model to check, like if that has COVID positive, yes or no, and you can train the model to figure out, right, like where you reject or accept the request. So once you have validated the person has COVID, the next thing is you want to set up a workflow where you send a request to the payroll system to give them a 50K loan. uh, so you set that connection and you set up that automation. Then you want to set up another request to say that right, like should the money should, like in the subsequent salary it should be deducted. So you want to set up another automation for it so that you don't have to do it manually. Now some companies, they may say that like you need your manager's approval to get it, so you can set up a workflow. Instead of reaching out to IT and payroll, system triggers a like an automated approval Slack message to the manager or a message on Microsoft Teams, and they have the ability to say click yes or no, and they can do it. So pretty much, right, like you can automate the whole system. So launching that policy becomes pretty straightforward for HR, and executing it becomes pretty simple for employees, right? Like so many times employees don't avail of benefits because it's so complicated to get them, just because the systems are not automated today. And then you want project management, right? So a lot of internal work is essentially projects. So you want to be able to track and manage projects, assign tasks, add dependency. Your manager wants a bird eye view of what is happening. At an executive level, you want machine learning models to predict which projects are going to happen on time, which projects are going to have get delayed. So you can train ML to like predict that and raise red flags when projects are delayed, so that management can intervene and figure out, right, what are the things that they can do to get the projects back on speed, and right, like set up those automations in place that, like that set up critical alerts that happen. Or finally, right, like your organization may even want to track the time spent on project tasks and tasks with time entries, which, right, like without AI and automation can be a lot of manual effort, but you with AI and ML you can start doing predictions as well. The third one is, right, like you have so many different SaaS applications, and you have, right, like on the other end you have so many employees. Again, this is a classic case where you can use AI and automation to effectively manage SaaS applications. So say for instance your employee, like setting up automation, right, like you say, like we are doing this call on Zoom. So in most cases your employer provides you access to Zoom. So there are two steps over here. First step is, when you join the organization, can you automate, right, like you get access to Zoom. And the second thing is, the day you leave the organization, you need a workflow to manually remove access to Zoom. And Zoom is just one application. So if you look at every employee on an average has 20 SaaS applications they have access to. So doing this manually versus automating it is a huge deal. Now let's talk about employee onboarding. Now every employee, like the most critical, how to put it, the first, they say, right, like first impression is the last impression. And employee onboarding is where employees get a early glimpse into how amazing the organization is or how bad the organization is. So every organization wants to create an exceptional onboarding experience, but when we look at surveys, we don't see that in reality. Like how many of us have had exceptional employee experience, right? Like I'll just take a moment and think about it. Like, did everything happen the way it should? Like, at least for me, I can tell you, like when I started my career, I had some horrible employee onboarding experiences, largely because, right, like there was some delay in the guide. Like I remember waiting at the gate of the company I did summer internship for, because my hiring manager was in a meeting, and the guard didn't know I was supposed to join as an intern that day. So they made me wait till the time, like my manager came in. Now this is a very simple thing that can be automated. Same way, right? Like all the applications that you need access to. So can we automate and reduce that you need to request for applications manually? So that's largely my presentation today. And before we open up for questions, I would leave you with a thought. So there's a lot of talk about AI will, like take away jobs. And we saw, right, like you would have seen, right, like I'm talking about so much AI and automation. And does that mean that the number of people will reduce because, you can use so much automation? The answer is no, AI will not replace you, but those who don't use AI and analytics and automation will be replaced by those who do. So that's my closing thought for you. And now let's open it up for questions.
Thank you, Nishant, for an insightful session. Uh, we are open for the questions. Uh, if you can ask, so you can ask verbally, or you can drop a question in the chat box as well.
uh, I Rishabh, I have this question from you, right? Like you're saying that 40% use it, but actually help clients. Now, one thing I can tell you is like they are AI powered chatbots and they are dumb chatbots. Okay, so dumb chatbots are rule based, which is where like a lot of frustration comes in when we called rule based chatbots AI. Like rule based chatbot is like, like how you call an IVR, and like you have to press buttons to get to the right resolution, and they have limited automation enabled at the back end. So those chatbots are not they have some uses, by the way, but they are not very useful. But then let's talk about AI and automation enabled chatbots. So those chatbots, we are at the starting point. So the way you have to evaluate success is deflection rate in a chatbot. So when I say a deflection rate is number of requests that, say for example, if you're talking about in case of clients, so which is where you're talking about customer experience or customer support. So now you have to look at what is the total number of customer support requests that you get. So let's assume it's 1000. So if you're using a chatbot, the question to evaluate success is how many of those can be deflected by the chatbot, and the higher the number, the better it is. Will we reach a point where chatbots can answer everything customer is support or resolve it? Hell no. But what we want to get to is like continue to put effort so that we can increase the deflection rate. Sometimes you start as low as like a 5% deflection, which is not bad. Okay, like even a 5% deflection means that you have saved a lot of time of your employees in answering like low hanging fruit questions, and for your customers you have given them an instant answer. But we have seen like best in class companies reaching 60-70% with like using AI and automation. So just know that, right? Like it's a journey. So the higher your deflection rate is, the better it is, and there are enough and more examples where companies are using chatbots where like, and they are super successful in increasing the deflection rate. But at the lower end of the funnel, which are the companies which are using like the dumb, I call them dumb chatbots, right? Like it's a little derogatory, but that's what I feel about them, right? So they end up annoying the clients. But even those dumb chatbots have like a 2 to 3 or 4% deflection rate, which is also huge, which is not bad either. Just that you can do a lot more when you use AI and automation instead of using a dumb chatbot. I hope I've addressed your question.
Anyone have more questions to ask?
My pleasure, Rishabh.
So
Any other?
Nishant, one question is from my end. So like there are so many thinking like what is going to happen about the SaaS based platform. So like according to you, what do you think are the advantages of SaaS based platforms?
You mean software as a service?
Yeah.
SaaS-based platform are here to stay, right? Like we have seen a massive explosion of SaaS versus on-prem, and the reason is like a lot of the reason is dev cycles, right? Like the fact that you get a higher velocity on SaaS platforms, and the second thing is you don't have to manage a lot of the backend processes, right? Like maintaining the application, setting up the infrastructure. It's pretty simple for in like in the SaaS world. And the biggest trend is that SaaS companies are relying on product led growth, which is essentially, right, like teams start using it and then like the CIO gets involved and purchases it. So that is here to stay because SaaS companies have a huge advantage in terms of the data they are able to capture on usage and then optimize the product based on that, versus like some of the on-premise solutions that exist. So SaaS is a trend that is going to explode, and which is also visible in the fact, right, like if you look at pretty much all the new unicorns that have come in the B2B space, uh, rarely you will see a non-SaaS player become a unicorn of late, right? I can look at stats for last 3 years. I can't think of a new unicorn that is building applications and like which is not SaaS. So yeah. All
Okay,
right.
thank
So
you, Nishant. There is one more question in the chat box.
Naman, this is a classic question, right? Like one of the things that I can tell you is, in fact, I like some of the presentations I've done, I've actually put a graphic, right? So a lot of talk about AI is on like a promise, right? Like we were promised, if you have read the press, right? Like I don't know what your age is, but if you're a millennial like I am, uh, we were promised self-driving cars in 2015, and we were promised whatnot by 2020, right? Like if I were to pull up the press or articles from say 2010s and 2005, so that's the promise, and a lot of us are chasing that as, and what I've seen is a lot of failure comes from chasing those dreams. what we have to do is like, it's pretty simple, right? Like you have to plot the different AI projects that you can do in terms of complexity and impact. And what you would find is that you can build, or you can undertake a lot of projects which are low complex. And when I say low complex, what I mean is low investment and high chances of success, and that have high impact. Like there is a huge list of things you can do, and if you continue to focus on those, you will find more success. And the second piece of advice I have for any startup that is looking at AI and automation solution is, you also, like, once you do that analysis, the other analysis you have to do is, where do you build and where do you buy? So you will struggle to find exceptional data science like exceptional data scientists, and that's like, the talent crunch is real and the expenses are real. So, and the fact that, like, do you have data to build a lot of things? So a lot of things you will realize, right? Like what is non-core, I always recommend go with a player that is going to give you, instead of trying to build it. Like say for example, a chatbot technology. If you are a startup who's in the chatbot space, sure, you have to build it. But if you are any other, right, like if you are how to put it, a company for which chatbot is just a customer experience or an employee experience solution, there are enough chatbots that you can purchase off the shelf that work and have high deflection rates. And the fact that, like, the vendors are going to build these chatbots or build advancements. So I have seen companies try to create their own chatbots for customer experience, and I've seen, like, companies purchase the chatbot for customer experience. And I can tell you, people who are making the purchase decision have a higher deflection rate compared to like people who are building it in house. And people who are building it in house are spending way more money on building those and still getting poorer results. So you need to be very, very cautious about build what you build and what you buy. I'm not saying you should not build, but be very clear why you're building it, and is it core or not. And like you should have, like, I would say, moonshot projects, but like make sure that you're focused first on the low hanging fruits. Once you have knocked them out, then gradually increase the complexity and get those high impacts. Yeah, I hope, Naman, I've answered your question. So AI as a student, right? Like see, AI is a there are two ways to think about AI. And one is like as a data scientist, and the second is a practitioner. So what I would recommend is figure out what is the area that you really like. If you're good in maths and you enjoy coding, you can pick up data science as a career. And there are like what in fact, like when we recommend or when I'm partnering with a client on setting up data science as practices, we're even breaking down that role even further, right, into data engineers and ML engineers and business analysts. So you can pick up those roles, or you can like find out what you really like, Ram. Like say for example, if your calling is marketing, then you need to look at like how can AI and automation make your job better as a marketer, and how can you harness their power and understand it. And that makes you one of the best marketeers in the world, because what we are, as I was like, as my ending slide indicated, right, like every company or every employee, like wherever you're working, or if you're a startup, right, like if you're not using AI and automation, you will be replaced by those who do. So you want to be the one who's spearheading that change in the organization, or if you're a startup in your industry where you're using AI and ML technologies. And you can either do a functional area and harness it, or you can be on the build side where you're building these technologies and pick up a specialized role. uh, Once you do that trade-off, right, like you want to do a, like you want to do a discipline role, or you want to do a build role, after that, right, like there's enough and more material online that you can use, and you can look at, Ram. And hopefully, right, like you will be able to create a path. And if you need some advice, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer those second order details for you as well.
Anyone from the group? Anyone have any more questions? I think Nishant, we are good to go. Thank
All right.
you once again. Thank you for giving us a beautiful time. And yeah, have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Have a wonderful weekend, everyone, and I hope you and your families are safe and sound. And
So,
all right, thank you.
thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, especially thank you, Nishant, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.